So our quiz 7 is going to cover section 6.2, 6.3, 7.3, and then a little bit of review as well. So you have this preview for your quiz, and thank you for taking the time to make sure you did everything correctly. Number 1, we're going to simplify the following. So we're going to add together our like terms. Get my tablet ready. So we're going to collect these in standard form order. I'm going to start with the quartic term, so there's 1x to the 4th, and then the cubic term after that. Now notice we are adding all of our like terms, so 8x to the 3rd minus 10x to the 3rd is negative 2x to the 3rd. And then quadratic term, negative 7x squared, that is the only quadratic term. And then our linear term is plus x, and then later on a minus 5x, so 1 plus negative 5 is negative 4x. And then constant, there's a 1 and nothing else, so a plus 1. Now on number 2, please be careful that you are subtracting all of your like terms. Let's start with our cubic term, because that would be the first. Now notice there are nothing cubic in the first parenthesis, minus 11x to the 3rd. So negative 11x to the 3rd is our lead term. 7x squared minus negative 8x squared. 7 minus a negative 8 is really 7 plus 8. So that's a 15x squared. 6x, and there's no other x term, so plus 6x. And then negative 10 minus 6 is negative 16. Please use your calculator if you feel like you're going to mess up on that part. Okay, number 3, we're going to distribute first the 2x to everybody in the parentheses. So that's going to give us 6x to the 3rd minus 10x squared plus 4x. And then we're going to do the same thing, but now we're going to distribute the negative 3 to everybody. So we have a negative 9x squared. I'm going to write that underneath the other quadratic term. And then negative times negative would be a positive 15x. And then negative 6. And then when I add together my like terms, use my line, 6x to the 3rd minus 19x squared plus 19x minus 6. And that's your final answer. Now number 4 is a really big distribution problem. It's not as simple as it looks. You need to multiply x minus 3 times another x minus 3 times another x minus 3. So I always start by multiplying the back two together, and that leaves the first x minus 3 in front still, but when you FOIL x squared, x minus 3 times x minus 3, you get x squared. Negative 3x plus negative 3x is negative 6x, and then negative 3 times negative 3 is a plus 9. And now you have a very large distribution problem again. So we're going to distribute the x, and you get x to the 3rd minus 6x squared plus 9x. And then distribute the negative 3 to everybody. Oops. I'm going to write the quadratic term under the other quadratic term. Let's see, that's a plus 18x and then a minus 27. And our final answer when you collect your like terms, x to the 3rd minus 9x squared plus 27x minus 27. Remember the cubic expansion pattern you're welcome to use, however, you need to have it memorized, and I think we all decided that it was not worth us memorizing at this point. We're going to now evaluate function f at the x value of negative 3. So we have a negative 2 coefficient, absolute value of negative 4 times negative 3, and then plus 3. Now the key to evaluating absolute values is you start by evaluating the inside first. So that's really negative 2 times, that'll be a positive 12 plus 3. So that's a negative 2 times absolute value of 15 is really just a 15. And then negative 2 times 15 is negative 30. Evaluating at negative 1, negative 2, parentheses around negative 1 to the 3rd power, plus 5, negative 1 to the 2nd power. You also could store, remember when you store, you type negative 1 and then you hit the STO button on your calculator and then store it as x, and if you do that you can just type in the function exactly how it looks. But if you did this either with your brain or your calculator, you would get negative 2 times a negative 1, because negative 1 to the 3rd power is still negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1 times 5, so that would be a 2 plus 5, which gives us a 7. Alright, we are selling t-shirts. The class is selling the t-shirts for $12.50 each. The shirt costs $60 for the design, plus it costs $4.50 for each t-shirt. So they want you to first come up with the profit function. Now profit we're going to designate as P of X. Remember, profit is equal to revenue minus the cost. So for us, a revenue is that we make $12.50 into the cash register, at least, for each t-shirt. So revenue would be 12X. And then a cost associated with making these t-shirts, there's two different costs. There's a variable cost, which is 450X. And then there's also a flat cost of $60. So if I go ahead and I subtract both parts of that cost function, I get 12 minus 4.5x, and then also minus the 60. So when I combine, oops, that's a 12x. When I combine my like terms, let's see, that's 7.5x. Oh, I didn't write that right. It was 1250. Excuse me. Back up. Knew something didn't sound right. 1250. So 1250 minus 450 is 8x. Thank you. And then it also is subtracting the 60. So the profit on 125 t-shirts would be putting 125 into my new profit function. Now, of course, you want to think about the reasonableness of your answer. Come on, calculator. Yeah. And I'm too lazy to do this in my head right now. And I don't have a key. So 8 times 125 minus 60, 940. All right. Oh, just a moment. Okay. Now, function operations. We have function f and function g, and we're going to simplify whatever they want us to do, and then we're going to state any domain restrictions. So f plus g is literally, let's expand this. F plus g, and there's nothing we can do to simplify that because there's no like terms. But since it is a quadratic polynomial, there are no domain restrictions, so your domain is everything from negative infinity to infinity. Now f times g, we're going to have to do a little bit of simplifying because you can definitely multiply these terms together when you distribute the 4x squared. So we end up with 8x to the third plus 28x squared, and this time we have a cubic polynomial, which means there are also no domain restrictions, so it's negative infinity to infinity. Notice the notation. This circle means composition. We're not actually going to come up with a new function. We're going to evaluate. So you start on the inside, and if you want to rewrite it as f of g of negative 4, that's the notation I prefer. So I start with g of 4, or sorry, negative 4, and I evaluate that. Let's see, that's a negative 8 plus 7, that would be a negative 1. And what that means is I'm going to take this negative 1, and now I'm going to put it into the function f, because that's how composition works. So 4 times the negative 1 squared. So negative 1 squared is positive 1, 4 times 1 is 4. The answer to this question is 4. So the second number you get is the final answer. For 11, and there's no domain on number 10, for 11, they want you to set up f divided by g, which looks like this. And then there is going to be a domain restriction because we know our denominator can never equal 0. So if I try to isolate the x, subtract 7 and then divide by 2, I can see from my domain restriction that x cannot equal negative 7 halves, or you could even write negative 3.5. That's equivalent. Alright, number 12. They want to know f minus g evaluated at 2. Now you could do this two ways. You could either subtract f minus g and then evaluate the answer at 2, or you could find f of 2 and then you could find g of 2, and then you could subtract these two answers. I think that's what I'm going to do. So f of 2, oops, is 16 minus 2 is 14, and then g of 2 is negative 6, and then f minus g would be 14 minus a negative 6, which is 14 plus 6, or 20. New functions, p and q, and this time, notice this is a multiplication symbol, so p times q evaluated at 8. I'm going to find p of 8, and then I'm going to find q of 8, and then I'm going to multiply the answers together. So p of 8 would be absolute value of 3 times 8 minus 6, which is 24 minus 6. Absolute value of, let's see, that'd be 18 is 18. And then q of 8 would be 2 times 8 squared minus 3. Oy. 64, that's 128 minus 3, which is 125. And again, I'm not feeling like I'm going to do this correctly without my calculator. I already forgot it. 18 times 125 times 125. 2250. Okay. I will not take your calculator away from you. It's perfectly fine to use it on those operations. Now this, notice, is composition. This is not multiplication. So if you want to rewrite it as q of p of negative 3, then you know exactly what to do. You start on the inside and you find p evaluated at negative 3, which is 3 times negative 3 minus 6. So that's the absolute value of negative 9 minus 6, which is negative 15. Absolute value of that would be positive 15. So then, whoops, they want you to take this answer, put it in for q. So q of 15 is 2 times 15 squared. Apologies if any of this is wrong. I'm going very fast and not paying a whole lot of attention. So 225 doubled would be 450. This does not feel like it's the right answer, but I'm sure you'll fix me. I'm getting 447. All right, 15. They first just want you to sketch this graph. It's an upside down parabola that's been shifted up 5, so it looks, something like this. You could use your calculator and his table to find a better sketch if you'd like. The domain, I can see, goes from negative infinity to infinity. It goes forever to the left and forever to the right. Now the range, remember, always is read low to high. So for the y value. So I notice it goes down forever and then it stops up here at the maximum value. And remember, when you want range, you're looking at the y values. So the range goes from negative infinity up until the point 5, and it actually stops at 5. Now for end behavior, this is the one that messes everybody up. As x approaches negative infinity and x approaches positive infinity is always the same, because I need to know what happens on the left end, which is as x approaches negative infinity, and I need to know what happens on the right end, which is x approaches positive infinity. So when I look at my function, if I were to trace alongside the left part of it, I see it's heading down to negative infinity. And then as I travel to the right side, I see it's also heading down to negative infinity. Alright, 16. Again, this part will always stay the same because I need to know left and right end behavior. I guess I should sketch this graph first. So, I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to go to y equals and I'm going to type it in. X to the third power minus 2x squared plus 2 graph, and I see it's a cubic function, which makes me very excited because I don't have to do a really good job of sketching this at all. The reason is when I ask for domain and range, cubic or odd functions, cubic, quintic, and so on, the domain and range are always negative infinity to infinity and negative infinity to infinity because it never bottoms out or has a maximum. Excuse me. Alright, end behavior. As I travel to the left on my function, I see that he is traveling down to negative infinity. And as I travel to the right on my function, I see that he's traveling up to positive infinity. So there's your end behavior. And simplify. Oh, this is good old review stuff. Number 17, you have to simplify by multiplying by the conjugate of the denominator. So instead of 2 plus I, it's going to be 2 minus I. And you're going to have a FOIL problem on top, and then a much more exciting FOIL problem on bottom, where it's a bunch of it cancels. So 4 times 2 is 8. I have a minus 4i. I have a minus 4i again. and then I'm going to have a positive 2i squared. We'll simplify that in 1 second. On the bottom, in the denominator, you have 4, and then I have a minus 2i, I have a plus 2i, and I have a minus I squared. So 2 things we need to think about. Like terms in the middle, these cancel, and then I squared is really a negative 1. So what you really have here is, this is a minus 2 really, and this is really a negative 1 or a plus 1. So simplifying my like terms, I have 6 minus 8i over 4 plus 1 is 5. So that's an okay answer. I would prefer 6 over 5 minus 8 over 5i. That would be my favorite answer. And then we're solving the next question, so we're going to first add the 8. Let's see, it's 36, then we're going to divide by negative 3, and you get x squared equals negative 12, and then we're going to square root both sides, and negative 12 breaks into 4, negative 1, and 3 when you square root it. So my answers are plus and minus 2i square roots of 3. Oops. And then identifying the center and radius of a circle, we need to complete, whoa, I don't know what just happened there, guys. I guess I drew a line. We're going to complete the square twice. So I'm going to do it for the x's, and then I'm going to do it again off to the right a little bit with the y's. Someone has already subtracted the 45 over, and I'm going to add both of the blanks back in. So half of your b term would be negative 10 squared is 100. And then half of this is 3 squared is 9. So when I factor this and I factor this, I end up with x minus 10 squared. And this is y plus 3 squared. Oh, 55, 64. And these always should come out nice. I've pre-selected these problems to come out beautifully. So the center is at, remember, opposite of what's in the parentheses. So positive 10, negative 3, and the radius is the square root of that number, so the radius is 8. And that is your review for your quiz. If you have any questions, please come in and see me and watch this again and again until you know exactly what you're doing on your quiz.